Can $2,000 drones really destroy billion-dollar bridges? August 27, 2025. The calm skies above the Belgorod border were suddenly torn apart. 50 drones built from scrap metal, each worth about $2,000, were hurtling toward Russia's multi-billion-dollar defense system. Their mission? To destroy two strategic bridges and detonate secret caches containing more than 500 mines, 200 missiles, and 40,000 gallons of jet fuel, worth hundreds of billions of dollars. But could such fragile machines, made from plywood, fiberglass, and spare parts, really destroy the steel arteries of the Russian war machine? Within minutes, the world had its answer. The first explosions had already rocked Russia. Russia responded furiously with 5 ballistic missiles and 10 Su-34 fighters roaring into the important Ukrainian base. So what happened to the Russian base? Did the Ukrainian drones get past the Russian defenses? And when the missiles came, what did Ukraine do to fight back? Let me explore the truth. August 27, 2025, 2:45 a.m. In the darkness along the Belgorod border, just 18 miles from Kharkiv, Ukraine launched one of the most daring operations of the war. 50 homemade drones, assembled not in high-tech factories but in basements, garages, and abandoned warehouses. Their total cost? Only about $250,000, but the destruction they wrought cost Russia billions of dollars. This wasn't chaos. It was a meticulously executed plan. At altitude invisible to defense radars, 5 reconnaissance drones scanned the entire battlefield, transmitting real-time intelligence to Russian command posts and air defenses. Below, 20 electronic warfare drones deliberately drifted into radar range, jamming frequencies, overwhelming the Russian detection network and forcing their operators to stare at a blank screen. It was a digital black screen designed by Ukrainian engineers with virtually no budget but boundless creativity. Only 25 attack drones remained, each armed with homemade explosives made from scavenged fertilizer, metal fragments, and detonators. Their targets were none other than Russia's lifelines: 2 strategic bridges supplying the Kharkiv front, massive underground depots of mines and missile warheads, and fuel convoys hidden near the riverbank. The numbers were staggering. Each bridge carried more than 3,000 tons of supplies a day. The nearby depot held more than 500 mines and at least 200 short-range missiles. If destroyed, it would cut off Russia's ability to hold its forward positions in Kharkiv for weeks. The genius of the plan was its simplicity: use abandoned drones to destroy billions of dollars worth of infrastructure. For every $2,000 drone, there would be a $50 million target waiting to explode. Ukraine was not just attacking steel and concrete, it was rewriting the rules of modern warfare. At 3:02 a.m., just minutes into the mission, disaster nearly struck. The electronic warfare drones, those 20 fragile machines carrying the responsibility of blinding Russia's defenses, suddenly encountered severe signal interference. A burst of static jammed their GPS feeds. In the chaos, 3 drones drifted off course, colliding dangerously close to the 5 high-altitude scouts. For a brief moment, the entire Ukrainian strike network teetered on the edge of collapse. If those reconnaissance UAVs were lost, so too was the mission. Without their live intelligence, the strike drones would be flying blind into one of the most fortified zones along the border. The Russians had over 40 anti-air missile launchers and 300 radar-guided systems in the Belgorod sector, enough to wipe out a squadron of fighter jets. But fate turned on the very weakness of the Ukrainian machines. Because they were slow, small, and built from fiberglass and plywood, Russia's S-300 and Buk systems, designed for supersonic aircraft, struggled to lock on. Missiles worth $2 million apiece roared into the night sky, only to miss drones that cost less than a family car. The imbalance was staggering. Ukraine's $250,000 swarm was forcing Russia to waste over $100 million in intercept attempts within minutes. Operators in Kyiv managed to re-establish control, pulling the rogue UAVs back into formation. The near disaster became a lesson. Vulnerability could be a weapon. Ukraine had stared into the abyss of failure and discovered that its weakest link was also its strongest shield. Do you think cheap homemade drones are the future of warfare, or just a temporary advantage? Share your thoughts below. 3:10 a.m. The night sky over Belgorod lit up with the eerie hum of engines as the strike drones reached their final waypoint. 25 machines, crude in appearance but deadly in purpose, descended toward the Russian stronghold near the riverbank. Below lay Russia's lifeline, sprawling ammunition depots stacked with over 500 anti-tank mines, 200 short-range rockets, and at least 30,000 artillery shells. Guarded by concrete bunkers and steel doors, it was thought to be impregnable. But Russia had not planned for an enemy made of plywood and scrap metal. The first wave of 5 strike drones dove steeply, their improvised charges slamming into fuel storage tanks. The effect was instantaneous. A chain reaction tore through the depot. 40,000 gallons of aviation fuel erupted in fire, sending a column of flame 600 feet into the air. The blast was so violent that windows shattered in villages 12 miles away. Russian troops scrambled in confusion. Machine guns barked from sandbagged positions, but the slow-moving drones presented an impossible target. Their flight paths were pre-programmed through GPS waypoints and open-source navigation software, resilient even when signals were jammed. When one jammer activated, the drones simply switched to inertial guidance systems. Cheap gyroscopes salvaged from commercial drones sold online for under $200 each. In the face of billion-dollar air defenses, Ukraine was attacking with the kind of technology anyone could buy at a hobby shop. The second wave of 10 UAVs tore into the heart of the ammunition bunkers. Each carried a shaped charge designed to pierce reinforced concrete. The results were catastrophic. One drone found its mark in a warehouse stacked with Grad rockets. The secondary explosion leveled an entire 200-yard block of the compound. Surveillance feeds later showed fireballs punching through the earth like volcanic eruptions. Russian commanders tried to mount a defense. Orders crackled over radio, but communication lines went dead as another UAV struck the command antenna. Within minutes, the garrison of nearly 120 soldiers was paralyzed, many cut down by flying shrapnel or trapped in the inferno. Then came the third wave. The last 10 strike drones, guided by the survivors of the reconnaissance fleet, zeroed in on hidden storage caves carved into the hills. When they detonated, the earth itself convulsed. Seismic sensors in Kharkiv registered the blast as a 2.1 earthquake. By 3:18 a.m., the Russian depot no longer existed. What was once a fortress of steel and explosives had become a smoldering crater, its destruction visible from satellites orbiting hundreds of miles above. Ukraine had not only destroyed Russia's supplies, it had shattered the myth of invulnerability. Join our mission to uncover the truth of modern warfare. Don't forget to subscribe and support the channel. 3:22 a.m. With the Russian depot engulfed in fire and secondary explosions still rippling through the earth, the surviving strike drones turned toward their final targets. 2 massive supply bridges spanned the Seversky Donets River, carrying convoys of fuel trucks, armored vehicles, and ammunition into the Kharkiv front. To Moscow, these bridges were the arteries of war. Each day they funneled more than 3,000 tons of supplies across the border. Without them, entire battalions would be stranded. The Russians had prepared for this. In anticipation of a Ukrainian assault, they had planted over 150 high-yield demolition mines beneath the bridge's concrete supports, intending to blow them if Ukrainian armor ever advanced. But that decision would backfire spectacularly. The first swarm of 8 UAVs dropped low, hugging the river's surface. Their crude engines buzzed like angry insects as tracer rounds lit up the night sky. Russian guards fired frantically, unloading thousands of rounds from heavy machine guns. Yet the drones, no larger than motorcycles, weaved through the firestorm. 2 were shot down, but 6 pressed forward, slamming directly into the hidden mine caches. The result was apocalyptic. A synchronized detonation ignited, setting off nearly 40,000 pounds of explosives buried beneath the bridge pylons. A shockwave ripped through the river valley. Chunks of reinforced concrete, each weighing several tons, were hurled into the air. The central span of the first bridge folded inward, collapsing into the water with a thunderous roar. At the second bridge, 7 more drones carried out a suicide run, targeting the fuel tankers attempting a desperate crossing. The impact turned the vehicles into fireballs, cascading flames onto the steel supports. Within minutes, 70% of the bridge's structure was compromised, twisting and sagging until the roadway split apart. By 3:35 a.m., both bridges were reduced to skeletal wrecks, utterly impassable. Satellite imagery confirmed what commanders in Kyiv already knew. Russia's most vital supply lines to Kharkiv had been severed. Thousands of troops on the front lines were now cut off from fuel, ammunition, and reinforcements. What began as a swarm of scrap-built drones had crippled infrastructure worth hundreds of millions of dollars in under 15 minutes. Ukraine had not just destroyed steel and stone, it had struck directly at the backbone of Russia's war machine. You won't believe what happens next. Keep watching. 4:20 a.m. The destruction of the bridges sent shockwaves through Moscow's chain of command. What was supposed to be a secure lifeline for the Kharkiv front had collapsed in less than 15 minutes. Russian generals, humiliated and enraged, ordered an immediate retaliation. Within minutes, the night sky lit up with the trails of 5 ballistic missiles launched from positions deep inside Belgorod. Each carried a warhead capable of leveling a military base, traveling at speeds over 4,500 miles per hour. As the missiles arced toward Ukraine, 10 Su-34 fighter bombers roared into the air, armed with laser-guided bombs and Kh-31 cruise missiles. Their mission was simple: obliterate the nearest Ukrainian forward operating base, suspected to be the staging point for the drone assault. If successful, it would wipe out not only the launch crews, but also the morale of the Ukrainian defenders. But Ukraine had anticipated this very moment. For weeks, American intelligence had warned of Russian retaliation patterns, and Kyiv had fortified its air defense grid accordingly. At 4:28 a.m., the sky above Kharkiv came alive. Batteries of Patriot PAC-3 interceptors and NASAMS launchers, supplied by the U.S. and integrated into Ukraine's Air Defense Command, locked onto the incoming threats. The first salvo of Patriots streaked upward, each missile worth $4 million, but every shot a life-saving investment. In less than 40 seconds, all 5 Russian ballistic missiles were destroyed mid-flight, disintegrating into fiery fragments before reaching Ukrainian soil. Shockingly, the interception rate was 100%, a feat rarely seen in modern warfare. Then came the dogfight in the skies. As the Su-34s closed in, they were met by a curtain of fire from NASAMS batteries, guided by American radar systems capable of tracking over 60 targets simultaneously. Within 3 minutes, 6 Su-34s were shot down, their wreckage raining across open fields. The remaining 4 turned back in panic, dumping their payloads into empty farmland before retreating across the border. On the ground, Ukrainian soldiers watched in awe as the counterstrike dissolved into failure. What Russia had intended as a show of dominance had instead become a display of futility. Over $500 million worth of missiles and aircraft neutralized by air defenses that cost a fraction of that. By 4:45 a.m., the skies over Kharkiv were clear. Ukraine had not only defended its base, but humiliated Russia's attempt at vengeance. The message was undeniable. Russian steel and firepower could be matched and beaten by Ukrainian ingenuity combined with Western technology. The battle that began with scrap-built drones had ended with the annihilation of a Russian counterstrike. What was supposed to be Ukraine's moment of vulnerability had turned into one of its most decisive victories. By dawn on August 27, 2025, the battlefield along the Belgorod-Kharkiv border had been transformed. What began as a swarm of 50 drones worth less than $250,000 ended with the destruction of depots, the collapse of 2 strategic bridges, and the failure of Russia's retaliatory strike. In less than 3 hours, Ukraine had crippled a supply chain that delivered over 3,000 tons of fuel and ammunition per day, severed Russia's frontline logistics, and exposed the vulnerabilities of a superpower to weapons built from scrap metal. The numbers told the story. 40,000 gallons of aviation fuel incinerated, 500 mines, and 200 rockets detonated, 70% of 2 bridges reduced to rubble, and a Russian counterstrike worth $500 million neutralized without a single Ukrainian loss. It was a campaign that rewrote the cost of war. For every $5,000 drone, Russia lost tens of millions in infrastructure, supplies, and prestige. But beyond the statistics, the message was louder still. Warfare was no longer about who had the most planes, the most tanks, or the biggest bombs. It was about adaptability, innovation, and the courage to weaponize ingenuity against overwhelming force. Ukraine had shown that a nation fighting for survival could outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast an enemy many times larger.